Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's garden chat. Joining me today will be Victoria Burns, who is connecting with me now. Hey, Victoria.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm really good, although I'm not in my garden because I couldn't get the lighting to work out. So I'm with
Okay, that's fair.
books instead. How are
I, I,
you?
I'm doing well. I mean, stuck at home like everyone else, kind of going through, is it July now?
It is, in fact.
Amazing. So I was hoping that we could start this out. You and I had spoken a while back, and that you could just fill in kind of people who are listening with your background, where you came from, what led you to where you are now. That way people just get a better sense of you.
Okay, so maybe should I do the speed version?
Yes,
Um,
speed version is great. Then if questions pop up, we can slow down.
Okay, so I may skip. I was born on the East Coast, raised in the Midwest in Cincinnati, and I took an amazing art history class my senior year in high school. So that kind of got me right away. Went
Do
to
you remember
school.
the name of that teacher?
Oh, I absolutely do. Betsy Sittenfeld. So she's she's
Thank you, Betsy.
she's still around, and her daughter Curtis Sittenfeld's a really great writer. So
Really?
yeah, there you go. I studied art history at Northwestern. My senior year, I got an internship through the dean to work at the Museum of Contemporary Art in my senior year in college. So I worked with John Neff, some people might know, and the curator Mary Jane Jacob,
Hmm.
and Lynn Warren. So I had an amazing early experience. I'm 19 years old, and then I worked for a gallery till I was 23. My husband and I moved to Berlin in the early 90s. I worked actually at a gallery there, and I curated a show on photography. And the catalog for the exhibition, one of the writers was our beloved Jerry Saltz, in
Really?
addition, in addition to Catherine Hickson and Judith Kirschner, who was an
What was the name
educator.
of the gallery in Berlin?
It was the Raab Gallery. They were the foremost dealer of expressionists, the sort of 80s expressionist artists like Rainer Fetting and um, Karl Horst Hödecke and a number of other German artists. But anyway, the show was a photography exhibition. It was something I asked her to do.
Hmm.
And we produced an 85-page color catalog, and the show traveled to Milan and London. So
Amazing.
yeah, and the catalog was in 3 languages, and I just told you the writers. So it was actually a kind of a fabulous ticket for me when I came back to Chicago, and I landed the job of a part-time, I'll say part-time because I'm not going to make it sound bigger than it was, but it was a fabulous part-time curatorial job for the MacArthur Foundation. And I worked there for 15,
Amazing.
and I worked there for 15 years acquiring work with very small budget. You know, this is the place of the Genius Grant. So they give
Yeah.
away huge Genius Grants, but on the walls, they were supporting younger artists. So at the time, I bought Shazia Sikander, Vic Muniz, Zhang Huan,
Hmm.
Michal Rovner, um, Dawood Bey, a number of people. So this is really early 90s.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I had but it was a wonderful thing because I was also having young children, and so I had the perfect gig actually to, keep my career alive, but also work for myself. So that's also how I started art advising. And I've actually been doing that since the early 90s as well. And then co-curated and produced a conference with Expo Chicago, the art fair folks, Tony
Hmm.
Kerman.
I do. I
Um,
love Tony.
so we did a huge conference for them called "The Art World is Flat," and it was at the Pritzker Pavilion on
Hmm.
the stage in Millennium Park, and it was like the Davos of culture. We had artists and filmmakers. Peter Sellers spoke; he was the keynote speaker. Bruce Ferguson, who we just lost last year, the president of Otis, was
Yes.
another keynote speaker. Anna Devere Smith performed. Um, Bruce Mao spoke. It was like an amazing cultural, for me, graduate school 3-day project that I did in 2007. And
Wow.
then had small art advising projects. It was definitely petering out around 2009 when my husband and I had the opportunity to move to Los Angeles. So I moved here in 2010, and I've been art advising for the last 8 years. Kind of had a phenomenal reboot in a city that itself was really evolving since 2010. So it's just been a great period of time for me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I feel like that was perfect. Um,
Thanks.
And on that note, we wanted to talk today about the works that we've placed together with clients. And so I thought that we would start with, let me actually switch this so people can see it a bit better, with this work by Edgar Arcenaux, which we placed with a client in the Midwest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. In
We're
the
intentionally
Detroit,
remaining a bit vague.
yeah, well, in the Detroit area, and it's important because for the viewers that might not be able to read it, it's actually a cover of a newspaper and it says Detroit Strife on it. But it's a mirrored surface. Behind it is actually an image, and then there's the text panel, which is on the face of the glass.
Yes.
And I really wanted to focus on clients because what's the most extraordinary thing that I get to do is help people connect. And you know, a lot of people think when they first start working with you and they don't know how to collect art, they're just kind of doing their home, if you will. It's how do you progress people from, I just want some pretty things on my walls, to I want something that has content that will, you know, cause me to think and my guests to think. And so this was one of those wonderful epiphany moments because she saw this in your booth. There was a pair of them and we looked at both of them, and you and I have a little horror story to tell, which is one of the pieces, one of the other pieces got shipped and we had to trade them, but doesn't matter. It all worked out. Nothing was damaged.
It worked out in the end.
And it is the right piece that she loves and finds meaning in, and so is able to also engage her guests in conversations about, guess what we're going through right now, you know,
yeah,
riots.
Exactly. This piece is so timely. I think there's something so wonderful about it being sublimely beautiful. I mean, you find yourself drawn into these boxes. It's mirrored. You want to see yourself. You want to see the landscape behind, but then you're implicated in the message that you're reading. Absolutely. Because suddenly you see your face. And so I absolutely love this series and think that she's so lucky to have this work.
Yeah. A very evolved person and thinker and really engaged. So, and we did this many years ago, right? This is 6 or 7 years ago. So we've been doing, I just wanted to underscore that you, your gallery, and I have been placing artists of color for a very long time. This is not new. So it's only that, you know, I think the art world has always been, you know, slightly ahead of the zeitgeist in terms of, I'm not saying we do a perfect job of it. I'm not saying that at all whatsoever.
No.
But at least we've been thinking very diversely about culture and what's happening around the world and artists' voices.
Yeah, well, and making sure that when we place these work with collectors, that they understand the implications of them, that they understand the gravity of kind of what they're taking on. It really is a responsibility to own a work like this, because you have to understand it on this level where when people engage with it, that you are advocating for that work, which people can choose not to do. But I feel like if you're going to invest in something like this, that's already something you're interested in.
Right.
And then moving on, this is a gorgeous Sadie Benning work. Someone earlier said that Tony is actually on this conversation. And of course, all of these pieces have been placed at his art fair so far. So hi, Tony.
Oh, good. Yes, good for us. Good for us. In fact, the other little fun thing that was happening when we were looking at this piece is I think I had awareness of who else was hovering over our shoulder trying to buy this piece.
You did.
I did. I knew exactly who was there, and we had already been there and placed a hold on it. It was sort of the early days of Sadie's, you know, the beginning of people understanding Sadie's work and appreciating the labor that is involved. These are, you know, for people who don't know her work, this is a puzzle. I mean, it's heavily carved, MDF board, and has this, and I don't know if it's, you want to say? Sorry.
Oh, just hand cut out MDF pieces. Sorry, I keep on zooming in on myself. I'm trying to show the detail.
There you go.
So
that's good.
Sadie hand cuts all of them out and then actually goes in and covers them with aqua resin and then paints them with cassine, a milk-based paint. And so each of these becomes its own sculptural object that's put together like a puzzle in the end. And Sadie, as a transgender artist, has always been exploring this kind of abstraction of self. So within each of these works, Sadie has been exploring personal identity, but from the outside perspective, all we really see are these kind of precarious compositions or explosions of color.
I mean, I have to admit, we both have placed a lot of content-rich art, but we also appreciate good formal abstraction, and that's what this is in a fresh, new way. Yes,
that rides that line between sculpture and painting, where so many people are unsure. And I have seen more artists recently come out with kind of similar ideas recently, but I feel like when Sadie was developing this practice, it felt so incredibly new.
Yeah.
These sculptural forms presenting themselves as paintings.
And the surfaces are really tactile. So that's the other thing. There's something very special and unique about that particular medium. So I just
Yes.
want there. It feels like wax or paste, or I don't know. There's just something kind of more than paint to it. It's
Well,
really
almost
interesting.
pleather-like. A lot of people have commented on how it feels like tufted leather that they want to touch. These
Yeah.
pieces scream to be touched, and yet you can't.
Yeah.
The finger oil destroys them.
Yeah.
And then I love this particular work. This is a portrait of Thomas Lavin by Raffi Kalenderian, a Los Angeles-based artist. And this piece in particular, I think, was so special because we had it in our Miami presentation. I'd sent you the preview and you called me and you were like, I have the person for this. I know it. And within seconds, she had fallen in love, had bought the work. And
But
then,
wait, it's a better story though.
oh,
It's
I know, you have to finish it.
Oh my gosh.
I,
So yeah, what was more important about it was that actually she didn't know the backstory. So what's cool is that she was attracted to the portrait, which by the way, everyone is definitely life size. So this is a 5-6 foot man size painting.
yeah.
And anyway, and knew his name was Thomas, but didn't know who it was. And by the way, this client had quite an extraordinary collection of wall coverings around her home. And I know that sounds like, oh no, wallpaper, really busy, but in fact, they were just really textural and interesting, and she was obsessed. So they were everywhere. And so this is the designer. Thomas Lavin is the designer of these particular wall coverings. And so in the background, this backdrop of his painting looks like wood, but it also could be trompe l'oeil. And
Yes.
so anyway, it had layers to it because bought it from love, but then there was a true connection to the man himself with the client. So that was great.
And have they had a chance to meet in person yet?
No, they've actually
Okay.
they've crisscrossed the country a little bit. They've moved from Los Angeles to the Midwest and back to Arizona. So we're actually in the process of reinstalling a number of the pieces,
Okay.
which
Good
we'll
to
also
know.
be talking about later today. That belong to that.
Amazing. Anything else to say about this work?
No.
Okay. Next up, I wish I could pull myself out of the way so everyone could see this Charles Gaines work. This is a Central Park series, and for those who aren't familiar with Charles Gaines, he is a conceptual artist from the 70s, still alive today. I feel like I'm speaking to the wrong crowd. I feel like most people know who he is at this point, but
But not
with this,
necessarily. If they're friends and family, they might not. And so
that is true.
Can you show a close up so people can see? It's by the way, this is a ginormous triptych, so it's about 10 feet across. It's about 8 feet tall. The black photograph in there, it's in a plexi box. So the black photograph in the back of the box is actually Central Park. But on the cover, can you show details of the painting
I
itself?
don't
Or
have
no?
the detail shots. I'm so
Oh
sorry.
no! Oh,
I
okay.
know. I
So
thought I'd saved them.
okay, sadly. So the top of the plexi boxes are painted in his signature grids with numerals that are sort of color coded, and he's a very influential teacher, artist on quite a couple generations of artists here in
Yes.
LA and elsewhere. But again, I want to underscore as an art advisor, I feel like my job is to help people connect. And sometimes it's directly to the message, and sometimes it's just that their heart is beating out of their chest. Like they absolutely love something. And you had a huge show, and we walked in and her heart was broken because all 3 pieces had been placed in museums already.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've actually told you this before, but it took us a while to just acquire a piece, and sadly you guys didn't have one, so we had to buy a small one from a different gallery, and finally called you and
I
said,
knew about that one.
well, I told you.
Yeah, of course.
I'm
You and I talk about everything.
I'm always very transparent. So then I came back to you like a year or two later, and I said, or a year later, and I said, you know what? She just can't get the big one out of her mind. Can we please, is there any way? And so I guess we were pretty lucky because it was the last piece in this series. So this is number 10.
Yes.
So it has
this is the most dense.
the most color. It's the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. And then the client also had to rebuild her wall to be able to put it where she wanted to put it. So literally they had to take down the wall and rebuild it because it's so big, and it had to be sort of slotted in. But anyway.
Oh my gosh, I remember all of this. It's all coming back to me now, like Celine said.
Yeah.
Well, and what I love, so for people who are not as familiar, Charles Gaines works in sequences. And so number 10 means that there are 10 trees built on top of each other in this numerical fashion, where he starts at the 0 line in the center of the work, and then he builds out some simulation of the tree in a numerical grid. But by the time you get to this 10th piece, it really is this kind of depth of color and I absolutely, I wish I had the surface piece. I'm so sorry. But as Communication for Good said earlier, we do have these pieces on our website. Feel free to go on there, zoom in, check them out. They're worth looking at.
And it's on my website too.
It's also on Victoria's website. Oh, and I'm so excited about the next piece, Victoria. Arms are for hugging.
Actually, you can be excited about it or you could be devastated by it. So Arms Are for Hugging are made by Andrea Bowers, and she makes them after each shooting, a sad shooting.
Yes.
And so I have to say, this is I also kind of want to go back to my history. I have to say that actually in college, I studied with a woman who really taught social art history. So when we were even looking at the Impressionists, she would actually talk to us. We spent 6 months studying the Sunday afternoon on the island of the Grand Jatte, because George Seurat's painting is very complex and actually is all about class, and there's so many different layers to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to say, my entire professional career, I've really been interested in how art is a reflection of our times, and that I don't wish to decorate. I find a lot of my clients end up having fabulous looking homes and great looking art, but it's not because we started from decoration, we started from ideas. So getting people to be able to buy something like this is actually, you know, a leap of faith, and that they sort of enter into this larger discussion about the world. And so Andrea, you know, when I saw this, I couldn't believe it, because I knew her cardboard works, but I don't think I had ever seen the guns. And obviously the message is so tender, and the imagery and the knowledge behind it is so horrific. And I guess that's something else I would say about my interest in art, is I'm interested in things that have beauty, but also a second layer. And sometimes I even call it terrible beauty, because they're, you know, they can seduce you, you know, with a certain level of how it's made or what it looks like. And then you are forced, or if you're, you know, interested in learning more, it carries much more weight.
Yeah. Well, and for people who are not as familiar, this gun is actually made out of compressed cardboard. So Andrea, a few years back, started making large, almost tapestry-like works out of fused cardboard, where she was using permanent markers to put Walter Crane illustrations from the early 20th century, and she would kind of contemporize them with text about contemporary society that made it more relevant to the issues we're dealing with today, be it immigration rights, trans rights, gay rights. And so with this work, by her making it out of cardboard, compressing it, using that same language, there is this element of almost it being a toy or something that is not usable, and there is something that is so shocking about that. There are so many layers to this piece that as you look at it more, it becomes more horrific. It becomes more beautiful. As you said earlier, it kind of rides that line where you are repulsed by it, but at the same time, that pink is so inviting. We all grew up watching action movies, and so there's this kind of association that you also can't get away from.
Also the pink, it's Code Pink, right? So some of the money goes to Code Pink.
Yes.
Okay, just want to point that out.
Andrea's practice has always included this element of philanthropy, that when she's addressing a certain organization in her works, that the money would then go towards that organization.
And full disclosure, I've sold 2 of these, and one of them is mine. So
yes. And then I thought we have 2 more works actually to speak on. This is a Shana Lutker work. And it's one of the earliest pieces, I believe, that you and I placed together, if I'm not mistaken.
It might be, yeah, it might be. Can you read it? I can't read it right this minute, and I can hardly see.
Of course.
There you go.
I dreamed of you so much. Surely there is no more time to wake up.
It's from a Dada poem, I believe.
Yes. So Shana Lutker has been interested for years in the fistfight of the surrealists, and as a result has made objects and plays and performances in response to them. And so this is taken from a Dadaist poem where she's actually created a language out of graphite blocks that she carved to create a new alphabet. And so there's so many layers to this.
Do you have those too? Because we bought those alongside this. Do you have a picture of those as well? So anyway, so the charcoal letters you're describing, we also acquired with this piece. So this piece, by the way, is about 60 inches tall, and the light actually has a ongoing revolution in the light. That's so that's a mirror, but the letters are cut out and the light is behind it. But the sculptural part, the letters are kind of extraordinary too, like how beautifully they're made. So they look as if they've been cut out of that mirror. So it's really...
Yeah, and then kind of pushed out onto the ground. Are they installed in the home kind of directly in front, implying that they've fallen out?
Well, one of the fun things is some of these collectors I have moved them from house to house. So originally the letters were laying next to this piece, like on the floor. And now it's been moved to a different home in a different city. And so it's actually, this one's like near the kitchen. So it's on the kitchen, the letters are on the kitchen counter. I mean, they're there, but they aren't like on the floor per se.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Anything else about that work?
No, it's just fun to watch her. I guess I like talking about the fact that we have, sold artists who are very early in their career, as well as someone like Charles Gaines, who's very deep and developed in his career, and sometimes to the same client. So in other words, they kind of have not a high-low collection, but a multi-layered collection of artists in their career. And again, I'm so dedicated to people being in love with the work. So as much as I hope it's a good investment, and I try to guide people to artists who have great opportunities to be a good investment, my first and number one criteria is love, because you can't necessarily bank on art appreciating. And so I just want to, anyway, speaking too much about that.
No, but that's one thing I've actually always loved about working with you, is you and I have had many meetings with clients, and they're like...
You're usually the first place I go, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I always appreciate it. I love these kind of intros to people where we're able to familiarize themselves with different styles of art. But in every one of those meetings, you're always like, it is okay for you to not like anything today. Remember what you're intrigued by, but don't feel obligated to like anything in this moment. And I feel like as an advisor, that is the smartest advice you can give to anyone, to really sit with it and to understand why it's important to you, and to not just buy it because it's a hot market item right now. And truly, this is why I've loved working with you for years, because you're so thoughtful in the way that you place art. You're a pleasure to work with.
Thank you. Well, I think the people I work with know that our work gets better and better as the years progress, because I end up, I'm like an algorithm. So, our relationship is like an algorithm. The more I know, the better I get at what I show them. And so I have very, very different clients. I mean, one client is a magazine publisher, and his wife used to be, an internet executive. And so everything we did had to do with the media. And so it was helpful to focus. Other collectors are certainly about just like a single generation, but at the end of the day, they have very strong interests and passions. And so I am a giant filter. I'm trying to bring them the best things that I can think that they should include in their collection, but it's still a reflection of them. Like I'm trying to build something that reflects who they are, not who I am. It's just, and so, that question of what do you like and what do you respond to, it takes months to kind of refine that with your clients, and you have to give them permission to go, ew, I hate that or whatever, because in the beginning, it's not an intellectual pursuit. It becomes one, but in the beginning, it's usually very visceral.
Oh yeah, it's a direct reaction to what they are seeing. And honestly, that's the most exciting part for me, especially when they come back 6 months later, a year later, and suddenly they're so aware of the art world. They know what magazines to read. They're like, oh, I want to see this artist again. I'm so excited to see what they're doing in this realm. It's quite heartening to see you not only advising for your clients, but educating your clients, which is so important.
It's very important.
So important. And then I thought we would end with this piece by Pope L. Again, an early work and a difficult work at that. Pope L is a multidisciplinary artist. This piece is a Pop-Tart from 1997. It is a low-income food staple, and Popel was able to paint on top of it this kind of caricaturized African-American face, directly painted and then put into this wooden frame. And 23 years later, we're now looking at it. It's in your client's home. It has probably partially molded over in the center, but because there's so many preservatives, it continues to exist as this monument. And I love Popel's play between high and lowbrow, that this is a painting, but it's a painting on a Pop-Tart.
Yeah, and I love my clients' bravery because, yeah, some clients would shy away from that because of its ephemeral quality. And you can see that, you can even see the edges were sort of a little bit brittle, but even when we bought it, it was like that. But this was on the heels of the show at Mocha, and
Yes.
we had just seen that show, and it was really resonating the whole. Actually, it's like sort of a moment, seeing shows like that where, like seeing 30 Americans at the Rubel Collection. Like each time we are exposed to ideas, and by certain artists, then suddenly we have really, or sort of. Hate to say that, but sort of chasing them down. And actually this collector became extremely interested in Black artists, and maybe somewhat as a result, I can say that about myself, is a way to connect as people who are in more of a white bubble and not having a direct experience with Black experience, but starting to feel it through the art. And this image is actually, because I was just reading about them again yesterday. This image is actually sort of from a racist image, right?
Very much so. This almost harkens back to a minstrelsque era of the kind of over-exaggerated lips. No, it's very intentional, and this came from a larger show at our gallery, which, to go back, the Mocha show is absolutely sublime. I mean, Popel is this genius, and if you have not, please go onto Mocha's website and just look at the images.
Right. But that was where we were, so we were super excited, and yet the client does not have a lot of space for huge things. And so actually, at the same moment, we actually got this as well as a small painting, which actually says white cop, whiter donut. I mean, it's another really tough piece. But it's very hard to read, and it looks mostly like an abstraction. But it was fun to see the client care and connect with the sort of deeper, darker conversation. And, since then has acquired the work of Neri Ward and Kahinda Wiley and younger artists. So that, it's been Deborah Roberts, who you also represent, they own. And Genevieve Gaignard, we've also acquired from you. So their collection is both, older generation Black artists as well as mid-career and younger artists. And it's largely because their message resonates and doesn't.
Well, wonderful. That was the last image I have. But is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or does anyone have any questions in the comments? We can leave that open for a moment.
I don't see all the questions. I guess you'll have to read them or something.
I will. I don't think we do. So I think on that, thank you so much for joining me, Victoria. This has been wonderful.
It's my pleasure. So much fun.
So fun to go through our kind of history together and really dig into the stories behind them. It's really wonderful to see the pieces that we've placed together. I'm quite proud of the pieces that you're.
And that was only a fraction. We only went through a few of them.
Exactly. These are highlights.
We made a list of 15 or 18 pieces, which is really pretty great. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll see you in the gallery soon with a mask, I'm afraid. But we'll come back soon. Okay. All righty. Take care. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.